on something called as Thomas Piketty and what Piketty has got to say about this problem of inequality as far as the present world economy is concerned. Okay, ये बहुत tentative है A B, बहुत सारी deep जो economics वाली theories concepts है ये एक तरह से इसको skirt करके जाएगा. ये मेरी problem नहीं है. Even Mr. Piketty has done the same. And I'll soon come to it. What exactly is it that he has done? And Piketty sort of is a flavor of the season since he was recently in India and did go about talking a lot related to the problem of inequality in the Indian context. Okay, so त्या ठिकाणी जनरली असं असून करून की लोक वर्तमानपत्र वाचतात किंवा लोकांना वर्तमानपत्रात काय आहे हे कळतं. लोक वर्तमानपत्र वाचत जरी नसली तरी आपल्याकडे स्मार्ट कॉम्प्युटर असल्या कारणाने आपल्याला इथे काय लिहिलेलं आहे कळतं. त्याच्यामुळे असं मला वाटत नाही की पिकेटी एक न माहित असलेली किंवा काहीच जिच्याबद्दल आपण एकदम अनभिज्ञ आहोत अशा प्रकारचे आसामी आहे. And there are reasons as to why should one talk about Piketty, and very soon come to that. Like why should one talk about it? And त्याच्यामुळे today's frontline is basically on Piketty and the problem of inequality as seen by him. Okay, and I plan to keep it as brief as एकदम tentative as possible, not going into any form of theoretical debates for a simple reason because there is a lot of theoretical confusion as far as Mr. Piketty himself is concerned. So I'm not going to go into anything of this. Okay, one of the reasons why it needs to be talked about is throughout the world as the recovery of the economic slump that started in 2008 starts now getting sort of rigged up in some sort of a rut and it shows no signs of getting out of it. कुछ तो 2008 में हुआ जिसके बाद उम्मीद ये किया गया कि ये सब ठीक हो जाएगा. आज हम 2016 में हैं and this shows no signs of any better. And I'm not talking of India. I'm talking of everything outside India. It shows signs of becoming worse rather than becoming better. आणि at least येणाऱ्या काही महिन्यांमध्ये किंवा येणाऱ्या काही महिन्यांच्या हॉरायझनवरती साधारणपणे कुणाला त्याची अपेक्षा नाही की this is ever going to become better. One of the reasons why it's not becoming better is precisely because of the fact that there are certain structural problems which cannot be healed until and unless you do not pay full attention to it and you sort of don't go about dealing with it at full. You can't do piecemeal reform. So आज की तारीख में जितना भी रिफॉर्म किया जा रहा है as far as this entire economic problem across the world is concerned, वो एक piecemeal reform, short termist है, ad hocist है. आत्ताच्या घडीला जे दिसतंय त्याच्यावरती काहीतरी उपाययोजना झाली काम संपलं. उद्याच्या होणार ते उद्याच आपण उद्या. Okay, and that is precisely the reason because of which this problem has accumulated to this level. And what the Chinese did for almost 15 years is play a very bad game, hoping that कि ये कभी भी खराब नहीं होगा. And now it sort of promises to blow off practically everything as far as the Chinese economy is concerned, as far as the world economy is concerned. So ये एक तरह से accumulated crisis है. ये एक तरह से आज की तारीख में 2008 में शुरू हुआ crisis नहीं है, इसके बहुत पहले से शुरू हुआ है. B, on account of this crisis, उसका जो एक क्या बोल सकते हो आप उसको visible format जो है उसका दृश्य जो है वो ये है कि there is great inequality as far as the functioning of the world economy is concerned. There is a severe sort of inequality as far as the world's economic problems are concerned. And what now needs to be done is that inequality needs to be addressed. आता त्याच्यावरती जे सुचवलेले उपाय आहेत ते मोस्टली पिकेटी कॅटेगरीमध्ये जाणारे उपाय आहेत. ते मोस्टली अशा प्रकारचे उपाय आहेत की जे परत शॉर्ट टर्मिझम मध्येच जास्त विश्वास ठेवतात rather than something that would be long termist in nature. Okay, आता त्या शॉर्ट टर्मिस्टचा प्रॉब्लेम असा आहे की as far as most of the developed world is concerned, it's undergoing what is known as a demographic transition. And from their perspective, a long term effort makes no sense for a simple reason because we don't know as to what is that optimum level at which this demographic transition is going to stabilize. So more than anything else, for them a very important thing is we are undergoing a change as far as population growth, as far as the population itself is concerned. आणि जाऊन कुठं थांबणार आहे हे आताच्या घडीला मी एस्टिमेट नाही करू शकत. त्याच्यामुळे मी किती जरी म्हटलं की तुम्ही जरा आहे ना लॉंग टर्म उपायांचा विचार करता का तो प्रॉब्लेम असा आहे की आमचा सगळा प्रॉब्लेम शॉर्ट टर्म मध्येच. तुम्हाला लॉंग टर्म थिंग completely evades anybody's understanding, and short term measures are populist. Short term measures sound एकदम instantaneous in terms of की आता इथं they promise you something called as nirvana of social justice. But the problem is until and unless those long term measures are not on the table, these short term measures are not going to take you much away. म्हणजे तुम्हाला थोडासा काहीतरी एक दिलासा देतील की नाही हो ठीक आहे हे झालं, पण त्याच्या पलीकडे तुम्हाला घेऊन जात नाही. ओके, and somehow or the other he does understand this, but it seems for most people that he has not made a serious effort to in any way address it. Okay, and why does he not do that, or what should be done about it, and so on and so forth is what we need to be understanding. But I don't know how many of you remember this. 2011 ज्यावेळेला आपली स्प्रिंग अडकली, त्याच्याच बरोबरीने एक झालेली महत्त्वाची जी गोष्ट होती म्हणजे 2011 का क्लासिकल स्प्रिंग वाला प्रॉब्लेम वॉज व्हॉट वॉज कॉल्ड ऑक्युपाय tahrir स्क्वेअर. So let's go out and let's occupy tahrir square and stay occupied till Hosni Mubarak doesn't leave power. The second occupy went around in something called as New York. ज्याच्यामध्ये you had a large number of people occupying what is called as Central Park, that huge large public space in New York, with the intention that until and unless we are not heard about the working of Wall Street, we are not going to move from here. Hearing कितना instantaneous आया कि 2012 का जो प्रेसिडेंट ओबामा का स्टेट ऑफ द यूनियन एड्रेस है, पहली बार इस बारे में चीजों को एड्रेस करता है that the American economy has legacy issues, and these legacy issues demand that something called as the incomes of the top 1% of Americans needs to be now taxed more as compared to what it was being as far as the earlier years are concerned. म्हणजे इतकं instantaneous की Occupy Wall Street 2011 ला होतं, 2012 मध्ये we immediately come up with this idea the 1% top bracket जो है ना needs to be charged more as far as taxes is concerned. Okay, आता everyone knows कि taxes is not an executive order in America. When no tax proposal can go through until and unless Congress doesn't pass it. आता 2012 मध्ये जी काँग्रेस निवडून आलेली आहे त्याच्याबद्दल तुम्हाला खूप चांगलं माहिती की डेमोक्रॅट्स डोंट एन्जॉय एनी पार्ट. मग म्हटल्यानंतर जरी तुमची इच्छा असली की बाबा taxes should be there and you should start increasing taxes as far as the top 1% of the American population is concerned. The question is how do you do it, especially with Republicans dominating both houses of Congress, dead opposed to this idea that taxes need to be increased. So त्या केस मध्ये हे एक्झॅक्टली करणार कसं. पण I am not a more severe case of governments trying to address a certain sense of discontent and discrimination with so speed. ओके, एकदम स्पीडी था ये सब कुछ. अच्छा, इस वक्त पिकेटी क्या कर रहा है? तो इस वक्त पिकेटी इज नोन एज फार एज द इकोनॉमिक सर्कल्स आर कंसर्न्ड. व्हाट इज वेरी सरप्राइजिंग इज दिस मैन इज वेरी यंग, very young. I don't know whether that strikes you or not. He was born in 1971. So as of now he is not even 45 years of age. आणि ह्या 45 years मध्ये साहेबांनी जे काही मिळवून झालेले in terms of a certain sort of glory, in terms of a certain sort of significance and importance, is so huge and unbelievable कि कार्ल मार्क्स जिथं कुठं असेल तिथं त्याला लय वाईट वाटतं. मार्क्स का Das Kapital का फर्स्ट वॉल्यूम 1867 में आया. Okay, 1867. It took approximately 2 years after that, almost 1867 के बाद I think 1870-71 के आसपास, कि the first 1000 copies of the first edition were sold. पहिल्या 1000 कॉपीज जायला ऑलमोस्ट आम्हाला 2.5-3 वर्ष लागली. 20 वर्षांनी Das Kapital was translated into English. Okay, आणि the world's major economies started talking about him only in the 20th century. त्यानंतर मार्क्सला यशस्वी होण्यासाठी जगभरात पोहोचण्यासाठी बरेच वर्ष लागली. Capital in the 21st century was published in French in 2013 as a 970-page book. In 2014, Arthur Goldhammer translated it in English for the Harvard University Press as a 550 page book. And the book by now, and it's quite a bulk. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's like quite a bulky book. It text as beat, the grantha म्हणजे beat, हे काही त्याच्याच पासून म्हणजे seriously packed copies जर का तुम्ही एखाद्याला आणली आणि जर आणि डोकं फुटल्यासारखं त्याच्या अजून तरी मी पेपर बॅग बघितलेला आहे. भारतात जी कॉपी सर्क्युलेट होतीये ती इज डन बाय हार्वर्ड पब्लिशिंग, हार्वर्ड बिझनेस पब्लिशिंग, जी ते इंडियन प्राइसला विकतात. इट्स क्वाइट अ बिग थिक बल्की बुक. Okay, and this was 2013 when he's not even 41 years of age, 41 years of age. So hardly is there a phenomena of somebody who has been this successful at this young an age. At the age of 22, he received his doctorate from one of these French institutes in Paris. In 2006, the French government appointed him as the first director of the newly established Paris School of Economics. लोक 20व्या वर्षात किंवा 20च्या दशकात असताना काय करतात तिथे 2002 चं थीसिस आहे ना, Capital in the 21st Century is a continuation of it. Okay, in a way the whole pot was put on the stove sometime in 2002 and it was finally cooked up in 2013. For approximately 12 years, he and two teams, one located in Europe, one located in America, have been sifting through 250 years ka data of income tax as far as 22 countries are concerned. फार कमी countries आहेत की ज्यांच्यासाठी त्यांच्याकडे 250 वर्षाचा डेटा आहे. त्याच्यामध्ये you have the United States, त्याच्यामध्ये you have Britain, you have France, पण बाकीच्या कंट्रीज आहेत त्या जेव्हा त्यांच्याकडे डेटा अवेलेबल झाला त्यावेळेसपासूनचा डेटा त्यांनी ऍक्सेस केलेला आहे. पण 22 countries का डेटा is what he has gone through. 12 to 13 years is what they have taken to go through this data. त्याच्यामुळे every premise is grounded in something called as solid facts, and everything has a certain sort of an empirical evidence. आता प्रॉब्लेम आहे म्हणजे लोकांनी त्याच्यावरती प्रॉब्लेम भरपूर विचारले. One of the places where he has been extensively critiqued is this place called the Financial Times. इथे Financial Times जो लंडन से पब्लिश होता है, जिला हा जुना छंद आहे की अशा सगळ्या प्रकारचा जो पाथ ब्रेकिंग रिसर्च नावाची गोष्ट असते and which normally gets lauded up as path breaking research, त्याचे सगळे जे स्टॅटिस्टिकल डेटा मॉडेल्स आहेत ना ते सगळे घेऊन बसायचे, ते सगळे अॅनलाइज करायचे आणि त्याच्यानंतर त्याच्यावरती आपल्या पेपर मध्ये त्याच्याबद्दल डिटेल मध्ये लिहायचं की हा माणूस कसा मूर्ख किंवा तुम्हाला वाटतं तेवढं छान नाहीये, त्याच्यात प्रॉब्लेम्स आहेत आणि दॅट इज एक्झॅक्टली व्हॉट दे हॅव डन विथ. आता at times this debate which has been initiated between him and the Financial Times is an extremely technical debate. And in most of the cases, the answer has been that this debate can be conclusively ended only if I have access to better data. But if I don't have access to better data, there is no way by which I can change the premises on which I am working. Okay? If you remember in India, this fundamental call and problem was that the Indian government needs to be more forthcoming about the income tax data as far as India itself is concerned. So the Indian tax authorities income tax data statistical tables मध्ये publish करायचे. In 2000 they stopped publishing this data. So you have a very small amount of data which is available and which is not enough to build up on any sort of an understanding as to what exactly is India all about. So India का problem उनका ये है कि data का base जो है ना बहुत छोटा है, ज़्यादा data नहीं है हमारे पास. तो एक चीज जो वो मांग रहा है कि इंडियन टैक्स अथॉरिटीज एंड इंडियन गवर्नमेंट नीड्स टू ओपन अप. आता व्हाय आर दे नॉट ओपनिंग अप याच्यावर लोकांनी ऑलरेडी अत्यंत सुंदर अशा प्रकारची स्पेक्युलेशन्स केलेली. त्याच्यातला एक भाग इज दे हॅव अ लॉट टू हाईड. आणि माझं सरळ म्हणणं असं की दे डोंट हॅव एनीथिंग टू हाईड, दे आर प्लेन लेझी, दॅट इज ऑल. की हे डेटा पब्लिक डोमेन मध्ये असायला पाहिजे, याचे काही सोशोलॉजिकल आणि इकॉनॉमिक अशा प्रकारचे कॉन्सिक्वेन्सेस असतात, ही एवढा प्लेन नाही कळत. आपल्याकडे याच्यातलं काय नाहीये, ह्याला प्लेन सिंपल कारण इज वी आर प्लेनली लेथार्जिक टुवर्ड्स समथिंग ऑफ दिस. when people have already smelled the conspiracy, and conspiracy kiti bhari hai, you need Piketty to come to India to tell you this, that your government is not forthcoming about income tax data in this country. And they have discontinued this in 2016. But in 2000 itself, हे 16 वर्षांनी सांगायला तुम्हाला एक फ्रेंच इकॉनॉमिस्ट लागतो. तुम्ही कसं काय करू शकता? आपल्याला काय करायचं? What we do is we calculate income inequality in India on the basis of NSSO का consumption data. And to is more than enough for everybody in India, including policymakers, big corporates, people planning their next brands and adventures. उन सब के लिए काफी है. तो उनको ऐसा कभी महसूस नहीं होता है कि like एक accurate data होना चाहिए from the tax authorities who are actually collecting the tax in terms of what are you collecting and what are the details of the same. Okay, आता in the absence of it, मग obviously ना की जर मी एक असा माणूस असेल की ज्याचं सगळं म्हणणं हे is empirically sound and is grounded in empiricism, आणि interestingly that itself is lacking in this place. मग म्हटल्यानंतर कसले पण पतंग उडवता येतात. And that is exactly what he did in India. तो काही पण बोलत बसला आणि लोक पण त्याच्यावर बाहेर लोक पण त्याला काही पण विचारत बसले आणि सगळ्या गोष्टींचा शेवट ठरलेला होता. आपण तुमच्याकडे डेटा फॉरकमिंग नाही सगळं माहिती आहे पण आता त्याच्या पुढे काय करणार. So and he has a very straight position जो gels well with his thesis. Governments across the world need to increase taxes. Governments across the world need to impose something called as inheritance taxes. And until and unless governments do not do this, आता आपला Indian problem सगळ्यात basic काय आहे? The tax GDP ratio in India is 10%. The total amount of tax collected by all authorities in India does not exceed 10% of the GDP. आपका GDP $2 trillion है, जिसके मायने ये है कि आपका टैक्स जो है वो approximately $200 billion के आसपास है. अब उसमें you cannot run a country as big as India with the amount of public servants which you have. Of course, that is something that needs to be dealt with at a very separate level in terms of employment के बारे में इंडिया में क्या हुआ है. Okay, so rapidly in the last 15 to 20 years, there has been a certain sort of move towards contractualizing and non-formalizing employments in the organized sector. अनऑर्गेनाइज को तो गोली मारो, अनऑर्गेनाइज के बारे में तो आपने सोचने का भी नहीं है क्योंकि वो तो सबके परे है. पर जो आपका ऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर है उसमें भी what we are witnessing is almost 67% of the jobs in the last 15 years have gone into something called as contractualizing and non-formalizing. म्हणून मी तुम्हाला मागे म्हटलेलं होतं तुम्ही जर परीक्षा पास नाही झाले, there is going to come a time when they are going to straightway tell you this that you need not fill any forms. हमने आदमी ढूंढ लिया है और वो आदमी ढूंढने वाला है. तुम्हें ना घर बैठो, तुम्हारा कोई जरूरत नहीं. So you better become serious about clearing your exams as soon as possible because that exactly is the sort of game afoot. कारण आम्हाला सगळ्याच लेवल्सला असं वाटतं की at all levels you can work with what is called as non-formal labor. काही गरज नाहीये ते फॉर्मल जाहिरात द्या, वर्षभर परीक्षा करा, मग अपॉइंट करा, मग पगार काढा. तुम्ही सांगितलं कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर 4 कलेक्टर मागवतात त्यात का मागव. कुणाला तरी एक लेबर कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर झाला त्याला 4 कलेक्टर पाठवून द्या, 4 बिल्डिंगसाठी पाहिजे. हां आपलं बिल कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर बरोबर सेटल करायचं, तो त्यांना काय देईल त्याचं त्यांनी बघून घ्या. That's the world which is going to dawn. And you are not going to be in a position to stop it. The only thing is, अभी जो अंधेरा है ना, उसमें काम खत्म करो. वो सवेरे होने का इंतजार मत करो. समझ में नहीं आ रहा है ना, तो I can't tell. He says, as far as India is concerned, you are in the worst of situations for a simple reason. Because the spending, public spending on health and public spending on education is fairly low. The Chinese, with all their displacements and problems, spend 3% of their GDP of $8 trillion on something called as health. Whereas the Indians, at the end of the day, we are talking of public spending. Public spending on health in India is 1% of a GDP of $2 trillion. That phenomenal is the gap because of which an average Indian spends almost 46% of his income on something called as primary necessities of life. इसमें दो बहुत अहम primary necessities है. One is something called as food and second is something called as medicine and Medicare. तो आपका सबसे basic problem ये है. Obviously, if you earn money and then you spend almost 40%, 46% of it on something like this, where are you going to have the other amount of money which you can invest in something which will let you have more leisure in life, which will let you work less? तो नहीं ना होगा. अगर आपका हर चीज इसी चीज में जाएगा, आपका इकोनॉमी का एकदम बेस बहुत लो है, तो जब मतलब भारत लोगों ने क्या आनंद अटको ना, China is slowing down, that means India is going to catch up. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. Even if the Chinese grow at 3 to 4%, remember their base GDP is $8 trillion. For India to reach something like that, India has to grow at the rate of almost 200%. मैं तो काई ऑनर नहीं है कि अपन at some point of time are going to leave the Chinese hair behind and the Indian tortoise walks off. I think that you but their case maybe is very pertinent. Is Piketty somebody who is applicable in the Indian connection? Is Piketty somebody who is relevant in the Indian connection? Given the fact that the Indian economy is a more well-integrated economy with the world economy, there is an indirect sort of an influence that flows from the world economy as far as the working of the Indian economy is concerned. So whatever happens as far as the world economy is concerned is not going to let you stay where you are at a happy condition. मैं सगळे गेले 20 महिन्यांचे प्रयत्न करून देखील आमची गाडी पुढेच जाईना. त्याला सगळ्यात मेजर प्रॉब्लेम म्हणजे तुमची गाडी पुढे जाऊन काही उपयोगच नाहीये. What has to happen is there has to be a movement as far as the world economy is concerned. And this movement ये आपका एक तरह से बंधन है क्योंकि आपकी इकोनॉमी को गए 25 सालों में आपके हर गवर्नमेंट ने बहुत ही सफाई से पूरी तरह से इंटीग्रेट कर दिया है विद द वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमी. Therefore, if you want growth in the Indian economy, that inevitably has to happen as a consequence of growth in the world economy. There is very limited that can be done at your end as of now. For it, you need to overall structures. त्याच्यामुळे every debate that happens outside India is pertinent in our case. तो हम लोग ऐसा नहीं बोल सकते कि नहीं ये भाई जो भी बात कर रहा है ये तो एक वेस्टर्न कॉन्टेक्स्ट के बारे में बात कर रहा है, ये हमें एप्लीकेबल नहीं. तो नहीं ये हमें एप्लीकेबल है फॉर अ सिंपल रीजन क्योंकि ये इंटीग्रेटेड है. दूसरा सबसे अहम चीज ये है ही इज डीलिंग विद समथिंग व्हिच इज अबाउट अ ट्रांजिशन फ्रॉम द प्राइमरी सेक्टर बीइंग द डोमिनेंट सेक्टर ऑफ द इकोनॉमी टू द टर्शियरी एंड द सेकेंडरी सेक्टर्स बिकमिंग इंपॉर्टेंट. सो तो ज्या फेज ऑफ कैपिटलिज्म बद्दल बोलतोय दी फेज ऑफ कैपिटलिज्म त्याचे टाइटल आहे कैपिटलिज्म इन द 21st century. ओके, essentially is reflecting on capitalism in the 20th century. So there's what is called the long century between 1919 to 1917 to 1991. So the end of the First World War to the fall of the Soviet Union. This is what the 20th century is. So he's essentially focusing on that. So when he says capitalism in the 21st century, that is part of his prescription about what needs to be done now. And the prescription एकदम one point prescription है. तुम्हें taxes वाढवा. आता एक ले interesting गोष्ट है. And I feel that if I don't share this, there is something. I love gossip. When this book was first released in France in 2013, this was hardly talked about in France. Hardly. Piketty is a largely unknown person in France, in the sense that the French are not much serious about him. The Paris circles in which he operates know about him. पण त्याच्या पलीकडे ह्या माणसाबद्दल ना तो कसल्याही प्रकारचा कुतूहल आहे आणि नाही कसल्याही प्रकारची जिज्ञासा आहे in terms of trying to understand की त्याला काय म्हणायचं. Okay, very rare. आता he is one of those examples of all those French ज्यांना फ्रान्स मध्ये कवडी बोल किंमत आहे. पण नंतर फ्रान्स मध्ये बोलबोला असतो कारण अक्रॉस द अटलांटिक दे आर रिव्हर. Foucault, not much appreciated in France, but has to be acknowledged in France because he's a big American phenomenon. त्यामुळे सगळ्या प्रकारच्या ते I don't know, it's a bad analogy. It's like the Ganasanghas of ancient India. गणसंघात तुमचा उत्कर्ष नाही, गणसंघाच्या बाहेर गेला ना की मग उत्कर्ष आहे. आणि ऑन दॅट बेसिस गणसंघामध्ये जी काही प्रकारची एक सत्ता मत्ता आणि एक महत्ता आहे ती त्याच्यामुळे आहे. पण आपल्या रिपब्लिक मध्ये so in 2013 when the book appeared it was hardly reviewed or talked about in France, and in 2014 when the Harvard publication वाला version आया and it was so widely feted across both the Atlantics, the French were like अच्छा इतना जरूरी था, हमें तो मालूम ना था कि ऐसा भी क्या है कि जिस वजह से इतना लाइक उसका बोलबाला है, we talk so much about him. 2015 मध्ये January 2015 the French government honored him with what is called the Legion d'Honneur, which is the French equivalent of the Padma Awards. And he refused the Legion d'Honneur. He was declared to be one of the knights of the Legion d'Honneur, and he said, I don't want it because I don't believe that governments are the right authority to decide whether I am honorable or not. Somebody should tell this to Anupam Kher. कि गवर्नमेंट राइट अथॉरिटी नहीं है कि जो ये एसेस करे कि मैं ऑनरेबल है या नहीं है. आप कौन तय करने वाले कि मैं ऑनरेबल है या नहीं. I think 3 months after that he landed in trouble because his partner went to the police alleging something murder. मग तसा तो ले उचपती. But nobody in France was worried about him till the British and the Americans did not tell the French काय माणूस आहे. उन्हें आवाज तक है तो problem is why are the French not interested in it? 2012 is when François Hollande becomes the president of France. And one of the first executive orders of the French government under Hollande was imposing a 75% tax on anyone who has an income of more than 1 million euros. I think it's 1 million or 10 million. I might be wrong about it. The guy एक शून्य इकडे तिकडचा काहीतरी फरक होईल. पण this was याचं कारण was Piketty. Piketty was part of a team that had worked up the intellectual resources which were required for Hollande's election. And so a diverse team of sociologists, of economists, of a number of people. आणि त्यांनी काम त्यासाठी केलं होतं की सार्वजनिक कुठल्याही स्थितीमध्ये फ्रान्सचा राष्ट्रपती बनता कामा नये. म्हणजे सिंगल प्रेमाइस. Actually Piketty came to Hollande through a very circuitous route. So Piketty didn't start off with Hollande. Piketty started off with Hollande's partner Ségolène Royal. But the minute the Socialist Party refused to make Ségolène the candidate for the French presidential election, Piketty shifted on to François Hollande. आणि साहेबांनी सांगितलं 75% टॅक्स काही प्रॉब्लेम नाही. साहेबांचा अख्ख्या पुस्तकामध्ये कॅपिटलिझम मध्ये साहेबांचं सिरियसली असं म्हणणं आहे तुम्ही त्यांच्यावरती सिवियर टैक्सेस यू डिफाइन कि आपका लेवल क्या है. हर एक कंट्री का लेवल अलग अलग है. आप उस लेवल के आगे जिसका इनकम है ना आप बिंदास टैक्स लगा 60%, स्टार्ट ऑफ विद 50%, पुश इट टू 60-80%. अब पॉइंट इज कि असं झाल्याच्या नंतर द नॅशनल इकॉनॉमी वोंट सफर. कारण these are people who have income, such bloated incomes that they are definitely capable of absorbing large tax increases. So don't be worried. आप चिंता मत करो, आप है ना बिंदास लगा दो और उसके बाद देखो. वो ऑलंड साहेबांनी राष्ट्रपती पदी सूत्र घेतल्या पहिलं काम केलं 75% टॅक्स. उसका नतीजा एक ही हुआ. The rich French either left France or sent their money out. And France ला easily करता है. कारण France is surrounded by Switzerland, France is surrounded by Luxembourg. मैं Luxembourg रथ नाही, Luxembourg निर्माणासाठी झालेले की फ्रान्सला बुडवायचं. Luxembourgचा उद्योग दिवसभर काय. Luxembourg has so many banks and the amount of money that Luxembourg gets out of banking as part of its GDP is like phenomenal and breathtaking for a country of that size. तुम करके रहे हो पण आपण त्याच्यासाठी जर इथे आहे ना. Lakshmi Mittal avoids all taxes by insisting on this that my firm is a firm registered in Luxembourg. वो फ्रान्स मध्ये हे सहज जमतं. लोकांनी फ्रान्स मध्ये स्वित्झर्लंड आणि लक्झमबर्ग सोडून द्या. लोकांनी फ्रान्स मध्ये उठून मॉस्को गाठलं. The Russians have a much better system of taxation as compared to the new French government, which has decidedly become predatory. 8 महिन्यांनी tax was withdrawn. आणि त्याच्यानंतर पासून Piketty and Hollande are so big a problem with each other. He says it's a hopeless government. But for Piketty, for someone who worked to get Hollande become the president of France, after Hollande withdrew the tax because it started affecting the working of French industry and business, the Hollande government now is a hopeless government. Which is obvious, na? मैं बड़ी उम्मीदों के साथ आया यार, तो तुमने क्या किया? तो तुमने वही किया जो हम नहीं चाहते कि आप करो. Piketty has no interest in the French government. The French have no interest in it. It's mutual. तू भारतात जा. त्यामुळे तो भारतात जातो, तो लॅटिन अमेरिकेत जातो, तो चायनात जातो, तो अशा सगळ्या देशांमध्ये जातो. आणि everywhere he is like a big star, except for in France, जिथे तो फक्त जातो to something called the Paris School of Economics. He कुठल्या and this doesn't take into consideration where taxation is good. I don't have a problem with it. But we as of now don't have a multilateral sort of a setup at the level of the world which would avoid people who are moving their incomes to avoid taxes doing so. We have started it, the OECD has now started it. But उसको वक्त लगेगा. ये immediately नहीं होने वाला है. ये इसको definitely वक्त लगेगा कि जिस तरह से ये लोग the minute you show an inclination to tax them out of something which they feel is going to in some way or the other negatively affect their profitability, have just one option left with them, they flee your shores. When tax evasion, you design taxation in a manner wherein you effectively evade taxes. तो दुनिया भर का problem है. आता this needs a multilateral response. But the multilateral response is not forthcoming because there are even today the Luxembourgs of the world. So there are सगळे छोटे-छोटे countries इतना they feel that they have a positive income to derive out of people who are fleeing these larger economies in search of what are called as better tax havens. कि जिधर you would be lightly taxed, जिधर you would possibly be not at all taxed. बाकीच्या केसेस मध्ये मल्टीनॅशनल कॉर्पोरेशन्स तिथपर्यंत जाऊन येतात. इंडिया तो युनिक केस आहे जिथं लोक मुंबईमध्ये पैसे बनवतात, मॉरिशसला टाकतात, मॉरिशसमधून उचलून आणतात, परत मुंबईमध्ये इन्व्हेस्ट करतात. आणि मॉरिशसमधून आलाय म्हणून त्याला एफडीआय राहतात. मॉरिशस फॉरेन आहे ना. Effectively what you are doing, so this proposal that you increase taxation, beyond this he has nothing to say. A fundamental problem is, which he mentions right early in the book. I grew up. He said I became an adult in the 1990s when the Soviet Union was declining. And the fall of the Soviet Union and the sort of violence which was unleashed by communist governments in Eastern and Central Europe to keep up the show is what we grew up with, and we feel that that is wrong. So Piketty का एक fundamental problem for a lot of people on the left is he invokes Marx without going to Marx. So Piketty is what is called as not a Marxist, a Marxian. वो Marxist नहीं है, वो Marxian है. वो टाइटल तुमने पुस्तकाचा कवर बघितलं ना, कॅपिटलिझम बोल्ड लाल लेटर्स मध्ये आहे. आणि ते इन द 21st सेंचुरी जे आहे ना ते एकदम छोट्या फॉन्ट मध्ये खाली आहे. So सॅडनी इतकी भारी गेम केलेली आहे in terms of how you brand the book. It almost seems की मार्क्स 19व्या शतकात मेला आणि त्याच्यानंतर जे उरले ते मी आहे. So he invokes it, but he is equally clear about it. Communist parties, organizing workers, taking recourse to violence, all of this is out of question. इसमें से एक भी चीज नहीं हो सकता है. इसमें से एक भी चीज करना ही नहीं. आता मग फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लेम असा आहे की जर ह्याच्यातलं काहीच करायचं नाहीये तर मग हाऊ आर यू गोइंग टू इन सम वे और द अदर get those who are influential enough to unleash this violence against people, rein in that violence and pay you that money which you want as taxes. आपका प्रॉब्लम शुरू कहाँ पे होता है? आपका प्रॉब्लम शुरू इस बात से होता है कि these 1% control the world's economy. These 1% have created and precipitated this inequality. And he talks about it. He says it in so many words. कि my problem is not about what they are doing in the economic domain. The fundamental problem is the way in which it influences the political domain. नहीं? Big business runs media. Media runs politics. Therefore, deductively, big business runs politics. One of the simplest ways of putting it. In more advanced countries like the United States, check out the data is now there in the air. में ज्या पद्धतीने रिपब्लिकन कॅन्डिडेट्स बोलतात त्या पद्धतीने सगळ्या लोकांची जगभरात अशी एक माफक अपेक्षा आहे की नोव्हेंबर 2016 च्या इलेक्शन मध्ये कुठलाही रिपब्लिकन मनुष्य व्हाईट हाऊस मध्ये जाता कामा नये. आता अशी अनेक रिपब्लिकन्सची देखील अत्यंत स्ट्रॉंग इच्छा आहे. त्याचं कारण निराळे खूप स्ट्रॉंग आहे की हे सगळे जे 8-10 जण उभे आहेत त्यांना यांना हाकलले ना कीच रिपब्लिकन पॉलिटिक्स कॅन बिकम द ट्रू पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ द फार राइट इन अमेरिका. So the idea is to turn the Republican Party more to the right than what it is as of now, and that can be done only if we lose the elections in November 2016. त्यामुळे त्यांची एकदम अशी बोलताना फॉरवर्ड इच्छा आहे की हे ना हो. बरं मग त्यातल्या त्या चार माणसांचं म्हणणं काय आहे की बर्नी सॅन्डर्स शुड गेट which is slightly difficult. म्हणजे अनेक लोकांना असं वाटतं की तो जिंकू शकतो because he has a good pitch as a candidate, which he has. And he also has his own idiosyncrasies. And second big problem is he doesn't have the sort of money that the Clintons have. Fox would love to get Hillary in the White House. कारण मग म्हटल्यानंतर आपला रोज रात्रीचा अर्णब गोस्वामी होऊ शकतो. Hillary Clinton White House is going to be one scandal per day. रोज रात्री you are assured of viewers. रोज रात्री you are assured of one big tamasha. And for this, what needs to be done is Hillary needs to go to the White House. If there is somebody who is desperately rooting for her, na, so members of the Republican right are actually desperately rooting that she should go into the White House. Bernie Sanders has this position, which he had vocalized before the Iowa caucus. Can you please explain as to how would you rein in American financial institutions and banks when in the last 4 years since you left the position of Secretary of State, you made $600,000 by giving speeches in Wall Street firms. म्हणजे ज्या firms American banking आणि finance याला deregulate करण्यावरती एकदम strongly insistent आहे. आपण त्यांच्याकडे जाऊन भाषण देतात. आपण त्यांच्याकडनं $6 लाख गेल्या 4 वर्षांमध्ये बनवलेले. आता how are you going to go in the White House and rein in these firms? To which madam has no answer. The Clintons are the only richest party in this election. Not bad, but they have no background in something called as money and finance. But if you look at the money and its trail, there's something called as the Clinton Foundation. इसका पैसा आया किधर से और इसका पैसा जा किधर रहा है, you are like shocked as to what is happening over here. Mrs. Clinton does talk things lefty. की ज्याच्यामुळे साधारणपणे असं लोकांना वाटतं प्रामाणिकपणे की नाही हो this would be an era of social justice. पण ते क्लिंटन नवरा बायको इतकी पोचलेली माणसं आहेत की भीषण पोचलेली माणसं आहेत की ते तुम्हाला तुमच्याशी बोलता तुम्हाला विकून येणार, तुम्हाला कळणार नाही असं. And this, you have Obama who says कि नहीं taxes बढ़ाना चाहिए. Nobody knows कैसे होगा. And then you have Piketty who says कि organization, getting out on the street, protesting. We need a new politics in which politics will become responsible towards the people. आता when they already have mastered the art of manipulating public opinion, why on earth would they make the double effort of becoming responsible towards the people? मेरे को नहीं मालूम. पर इट्स लाइक कि एक फोबिया है कि नहीं वो 90s वाला वॉयलेंस बहुत स्ट्रांग था, हमको वैसा वाला वॉयलेंस नहीं चाहिए। तो सिंपल सा चीज है कि अगर आप एग्रीगेट होके रोड पे नहीं उतरोगे, वो आपकी मांगों को कभी पूरा नहीं करने वाले। योर डिमांड आपण बघतो ना, आपण भारतात कसं करतो, आपल्याला रिझर्वेशन पाहिजे आपण काय करतो, आपल्याला रिझर्वेशन पाहिजे की आपण पॉलिटिक्स करतो का नाही, आपण सगळे जमा होतो आणि रेल्वे लाईनवर जाऊन बसतो। तुम्ही ज्या काढावर आपण नाटक आपण राजस्थान मध्ये करतो, आपण असं आंध्र मध्ये करतो, आपण सगळीकडे करतो, गुजरात मध्ये करतात नाही कारण तेवढा रेल्वे लाईन्सच नाही। पण जिथं क्रिटिकल रेल्वे लाईन्स आहे, Rajasthan lines connect the peninsular regions of India with the capital Delhi. The Andhra lines act as a link between South India and Eastern India. मागणी आपण कशी पूर्ण करतो, रेल्वे लाईन जाऊन बसा, सगळं आपलं फॅमिली घेऊन यायची सगळ्यांना। So until and unless you don't prove your force of numbers, they're not going to take you seriously. I don't understand that Mr. Piketty basically has a problem with proving the force of numbers and hoping कि this will work. मेरे को नहीं मालूम, मेरे seriously समझ में नहीं आता कि ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है। उसको लगता है हो सकता है, तो let's hope कि हो सकता है। Okay, but Marxism is something that he has a double sort of a problem with, in the sense he borrows his terms and concepts from there, but doesn't want a policy prescription from them. And nevertheless, the policy prescription that he comes up with lacks all force of argument for a simple reason, because it doesn't fall into Marx's idea of how do you need to organize the worker. अच्छा, वर्कर का तो प्रॉब्लम है, ये तो हम पिछले 2 फ्रंट लाइन से सुनते आ रहे हैं कि वर्कर का प्रॉब्लम है, बहुत बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है। WhatsApp before being sold to Facebook made $20 billion. The total number of people who worked for it was 55 people drove a company that made $20 billion before it was sold off to something else. That is the world that we are talking of. Why should they take you seriously? और मैं ये पिछले 2 फ्रंट लाइन से आपको बोल रहा हूँ, by citing different companies, कि यहाँ कंपनीज की वैल्यूएशन क्या है बता, यहाँ कंपनीज की प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी क्या है बता, यहाँ कंपनीज की टोटल एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन कैपेसिटी बता। It keeps on getting bleaker. You don't know where are the new jobs going to come from. अच्छा, in the West the idea is we need not be worried because the menial and the low paid and the more precarious jobs will go to the East. And we will handle the more proficient, the more proficiency and more technology demanding jobs in the West itself. So now that new jobs will be created. The only thing is there will be more non-formal, there will be more informal. But so long as you are working for the firm, you will make your money. But in a number of cases, you make money not just out of what is called as wages. You make money out of what is known as stock options. So the firm gives you something called as stock options. So at the point of severance, जिधर कंपनी आपको बोलता है कि कल से आप मत आओ, आपके पास खाली वेजेस नहीं है, आपके पास कंपनी का स्टॉक भी है कि जिसमें आप ट्रेड कर सकते हो। So for anyone in the West working that sort of job, so long as it is driving things in, is not at all a difficult problem. So the question is, can countries like India and China do the same? Is it possible? B, is it desirable? Okay. अब मुझे मालूम नहीं आप लोगों में से कितने लोगों का बैकग्राउंड है और something called economics, and how many people can understand something called as a Kuznets curve, which was एकदम क्या बोलते हैं ना ruling ideology in the West. The more an economy grows, the less is the inequality as far as the economy is concerned. So Kuznets proposes what is called as a bell-shaped curve. कि जैसे जैसे आपका इकोनॉमी ग्रो होते रहता है, वैसे वैसे आपकी इकोनॉमी में इनइक्वालिटी बढ़ते रहता है। एक ऑप्टिमम पॉइंट के बाद इकोनॉमी ग्रो होते रहता है पर इनइक्वालिटी रिड्यूस हो जाता है। Okay, and the reason why this happens is it's inherent in the logic of growth itself. The more you are going to grow, the more you are going to go about generating wealth and value, and this obviously is going to get distributed, which is going to go about reducing what is known as inequality. Piketty proves Kuznets wrong, and that is Piketty's eighth achievement. प्रॉब्लेम कसा असतो की साधारणपणे 500-550 ते 600 पानाच्या पुस्तकामध्ये काही तुमची इक्वेशन्स बरोबर निघतात. जसं मार्क्सच्या बाबतीत होतं की मार्क्स's diagnosis of what is wrong with capitalism was perfect. The problem was a prescription of what needs to be done about it. स्टालिनला त्याचा एक वेगळा अर्थ लागला, माओला त्याचा एक तिसरा अर्थ लागला, पॉलपॉटला कंबोडियामध्ये तर भलताच अर्थ लागला, आणि भारतामध्ये तर आपण सगळ्याचे अर्थ संस्कृतमध्ये शोधत असला आपण दिव्य आहे ना, मग आपण सगळ्याचे अर्थ संस्कृतमध्ये शोधतो, मग आपलं तर काही विचारूच ना. मग लोकांची क्रांती झाली, क्रांती उत्तर जग पण आलं, आमची अजून होतीये, ते संस्कृतचा प्रॉब्लेम. आणि संस्कृत मध्ये शब्दांचे अर्थ मल्टिपल असतात, त्याच्यामुळे लय वेळ लागतो. प्रॉब्लेम what Piketty points out is Kuznets is completely wrong in the sense that Kuznets derives his data from a very small time period. So he's just looking at the period from the 1880s to approximately in the 1950s. He's not looking beyond that. And with a phenomenal data set, which goes into, as I said, 250 years. Now the reason why Marx is different from Piketty is precisely on account of this importance of data. I don't know whether I've been able to hammer that point home. Piketty can become a more instantaneous publishing phenomena. Okay? And Marx can never become something like it for a simple reason. दोघांच्या स्टाईल ऑफ रायटिंग मध्ये फरक आहे. Marx देखील कित्येकदा keeps quoting from literature and everything, but not in as pointed a manner as Piketty was about doing. Piketty has a very easy style of writing, which is also very easy to understand if you have a basic hang of some economic terms. मग वाचताना सोपं वाटतं, म्हणजे वाचताना कुठेही असं वाटत नाही की यू आर रीडिंग समथिंग दैट इज वेरी बोर्ड. 80 ग्राफ्स है, बहुत सारे टेबल्स है, बहुत डिटेल्ड किस्म का मैथमेटिक्स है. When he could do all of this in that small period of his life for a simple reason, because he's focused as Marx is. But Marx never had access to something called as computers, which Piketty had access to. So accessing computers in the 21st century after the net revolution of the 1990s enables you to imagine and run thousands of mathematical computations at one and the same time. आणि ज्याच्यातला डेटा तुम्ही वेगवेगळ्या पद्धतीने अॅनालाइज करू शकता, हा डेटा वेगवेगळ्या पद्धतीने मांडू शकता. And obviously you can come up with these types of insights into things. So poor man Marx in the 19th century, in the 1850s and 60s, had to, even for simple things, rely on information at a time lag. 1857 का revolt. I don't know how many people have read what he has to write, or what he has got to say about the 1857 revolt in India. When he is receiving that information at a time lag, इनका इसका काही नाही, म्हणजे instantaneous आहे. म्हणजे हे रिच आहे in terms of data and statistics. तुम्हाला असा झटकन सांगू शकतो की तुम्हाला ruling orthodoxy था Kuznets for almost 5 decades. कि जैसा जैसा आपका इकोनॉमी मैच्योर होता जाएगा, वैसा वैसा आपका इनइक्वालिटी डिक्रीज होगा. नहीं होगा ऐसा, क्योंकि I will run a computation of 250 years of data to prove this. ऐसा नहीं होता है. उल्टा जैसा जैसा इकोनॉमी मैच्योर होता है, वैसा वैसा इनइक्वालिटी और बढ़ते जाता है. So Piketty does a reverse Kuznets curve. As economy keeps on increasing, what you get is inequality keeps on increasing. डोंट हैव अ सिचुएशन कि जैसे में इकोनॉमी ग्रो होता रहा तो आपका इनक्वालिटी डिक्रीज हुआ. And you can do this because he has a much more richer database to work on. So Kuznets' understanding of barely 70-80 years and against his understanding of almost 250 years throws a phenomenal challenge at you. But it does raise a question. The problem is that there's something called as growth and then there's something called as inequality. How does one understand the connection between the two? The idea is the Piketty idea is कि growth झालं तरी inequal राहणार आहे. किंवा grow होतंय म्हणूनच inequal राहणार. पण grow तर होणार आहे. That is not what you can stop. Why does it grow? It grows because of two things. One, technological innovations drive it up. Two, there is something called as a demographic pressure that drives it up. So as populations keep on increasing, you are going to, even if you don't want an economy which is going to grow. And the second reason why it grows is because of what is called as technological innovation. So both things are going to push it towards something called as growth. Now the only point is जब वो grow हो रहा है उसके साथ inequality grow हो रहा है. तो वो inequality का क्या किया जाए? और वो inequality की reasons क्या है? The Piketty idea is throughout the history of capitalism till you don't come to 1970, there has been no phase at which it grew with no inequality. It always grew with inequality. The only gap was the period between 1917 to approximately 1980s as far as more advanced economies are concerned. यहाँ एक साधारणपणे 70 वर्षात काय झालं? 60-70 वर्षात you had two world wars. Okay, he proves it with the example of France that before France goes in for the First World War, France का national income जो है और France का national income में capital का role जो है उसमें gap क्या है? Okay, so he works with something called as capital income ratio. Other than terms problematic, the terms intensely problematic because they have been right, left, and center been decoded and deconstructed. For Piketty, every wealth is capital. सब कुछ capital है. I have a Raza painting at home which is 3 crore rupees. ये भी capital है. But I'm not investing it into driving anything or productive use. फिर भी ये capital है. So Piketty का एक problem ये है, he uses this word capital in a very indiscriminate manner. He sort of puts everything into a single box called as capital. Makes no differentiation between what is known as wealth and capital. And then defines income as something which has been largely defined by practically everybody. All goods produced and distributed over a period of one given year. Society's annual flow of income mainly goes to consumption and all the remaining part becomes what is called as a stock of capital. Idea ये है कि जैसे जैसे as an individual आप अमीर बनते जाओगे वैसे वैसे आपका capacity to consume limited होता जाएगा. So the more rich you are, the possibility is that you have more restricted avenues of consumption. He puts his money into investments, he puts his money into savings, he puts his money into a range of activities, but he himself consumes less. This is not what Piketty did. This is something that has been done by Marx well back in ancient times. The Marxist idea is, as capitalism keeps on growing, as capitalism keeps on concentrating wealth in its hand, it creates a fundamental problem for itself. The system cannot run until and unless the masses don't consume. Where masses का consumption is related to what is known as the capacity of the masses to get better wages. पण तुम्ही जर प्रत्येक लेवल ऑफ टेक्नॉलॉजिकल इनोव्हेशन ला, प्रत्येक लेवल ऑफ टेक्नॉलॉजिकल डिस्ट्रप्शन ला तुम्ही जर असा उद्योग करणार असताल की यू आर गोइंग टू कीप ऑन लेइंग ऑफ पीपल. I hope you people know by now that Yahoo has already decided to lay off something like 1,700 people. It's a company which goes about making its money in billions of dollars. So the total number of people who work for the firm after these 1,700 are left is going to be barely 6,000 people. प्रॉब्लेम असा आहे त्याचा की तुम्ही दर डिस्ट्रप्शनच्या लेवलला यू ले ऑफ पीपल, अरे बट दोज पीपल का लेवल ऑफ कंजम्पशन रिटेन कौन करेगा? क्योंकि वो अगर कंज्यूम नहीं करेंगे तो फिर आप ये प्रोड्यूस किसके लिए कर रहे हो? अच्छा, ये जो प्रोड्यूस किया है इसको अगर आप बेचोगे नहीं, आप प्रॉफिट कहां से बनाओगे? So for the capitalist to make profit, what he has got to ensure is something called as consumption. But if consumption itself starts getting affected, then automatically it's going to eat into something that is called as profits. Symbiotic relationship है, और अगर समझ में नहीं आया तो एक तरह से this is the reason why he says कि capitalism keeps on digging its own grave. Because it doesn't understand this, that it needs the workers to support the system. आता हे सगळं इक्वेशन रिजेक्ट झालेले, याच्याबद्दल कसलाच प्रश्न नाही. The information economies in which you are living, you now need not go out and work. त्यामुळे एक प्रॉब्लेम आहे, त्याचे काही कंपनीज ऍक्ट मध्ये गव्हर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने वो सब सारे चेंजेस लाए ना, लेबर लॉज एंड एवरीथिंग. I don't know if you have any idea. 10%, 10 people and electricity. That according to the Indian government and its laws is what is called as a factory. So you are producing something with 10 people and you are using electricity for production, you are running a factory. If you are not using electricity but you are employing 20 people, you are yet running a factory. But the problem is that the entire system has undergone a change. I no longer need to be housed in a physical environment to work. Work itself now gets diffused. पर फिर भी फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम जैसे है वैसे ही बरकरार है कि अगर उसका लेवल ऑफ कंजम्पशन हाई नहीं है तो वो जो आप प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हो वो नहीं कंज्यूम कर सकता है. One of the reasons why Piketty becomes famous is because of something called as the 2008 का recession. अगर 2008 का recession नहीं आया होता, अगर 2008 के recession में इतनी obviously American financial companies involved नहीं हुई होती, तो possibly Piketty would have had to wait for his moment of glory. But the reason why he becomes so famous and so instantly famous is because here is a man who comes up with a new Bible for a new age, and the world has already entered into a recession, but on the other hand, it's the financial firms which are responsible for it. So the very failing of the banks and the financial corporations is what is responsible for the world being in recession. मग म्हटल्यानंतर हे सगळं तुम्ही केलेलं आहे. मग म्हटलं की we can very easily understand this. His problem is ये जो diffused process of industrial production है, इसमें there are two types of returns. One is a return on labor, second is a return on capital. Okay, return on capital keeps on increasing. Most of the time it is more as compared to even the growth rate of the economy. Represented by a formula which would almost make Piketty look like Einstein. I don't know आपल्यापैकी किती लोकांनी शाळेत असताना आइन्स्टाईन म्हटल्यानंतर E = mc² एवढंच लक्षात ठेवलं. आम्हाला अशी लोक माहिती आहेत की त्यांच्यासाठी सिरियसली तो E म्हणजे आइन्स्टाईनच. तसं Piketty has an equation called as R is greater than G. R is the rate of return on capital and G is the rate of the growth of the economy. And his problem is in the last 250 years, except for this one small exception of the period of the two world wars, त्या दोन महायुद्धांच्या शेवटी most of Europe and most of the developed north constituted what were called as welfare states. Those welfare states enabled an increase in population to access a better standard of living. Till you don't come to the 1970s, the दोन महान माणसं, एक मार्गरेट थॅचर, दोन रोनाल्ड रेगन, headed a group of people coming from Chicago and went in for aggressive cutting as far as taxation on income over a certain slab is concerned, thereby resulting in precipitating the present crisis. आज का crisis 2008 में नहीं शुरू हुआ. As Alan Greenspan famously told you, it started in 1977. For 40 years, almost 40 years, we were fooling each other beautifully with this idea that the more you keep cutting taxes at that upper strata of your society, the more you are going to witness a situation of investments plowed back into the economy, the more it is going to keep on raising up what are called as employment levels, and the more you witness a chance of all boats rise up. 2008 ला जाऊन आम्हाला कळलं असं काहीही होत नाहीये. जिसके पास है वो किधर भी इन्वेस्ट नहीं कर रहा है, और वो डेफिनेटली ऐसी एक्टिविटीज में इन्वेस्ट नहीं कर रहा है कि जिससे चीजें प्रोडक्टिव बनी. वो इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है ऐसी तमाम किस्म की पॉलिटिकल लॉबिंग में जो ऐसे गवर्नमेंट्स पावर में लाए जो और टैक्सेस को घटाए. Thereby leading to a situation where in 2008 the American middle class suddenly woke up to a situation 40 वर्षांसाठी mean incomes have not rose. For the lower middle classes they have stagnated. For the middle classes they have just shown no rise. मग पैसे गेले कुठं? मस्त पैसे गेले चायनाला. कारण there were a certain set of jobs which were shifted out to something called as China, thereby creating a situation where now that they don't even need to be dependent on labor at home to drive up their profits. And China and India, with these 500 million people each joining the labor market, proved so beneficial for a capitalist system that suddenly went transnational. The economic growth rate, you check out the American economic growth rate in the best of years, economic 1% जरी वाढली ना तरी देखील द्या राहते. We are recognizing over 7.9 का 7.2 का 7.3. The American Federal Reserve is happy even if you give me a figure of 1. एक भी बहुत अच्छा फिगर है. How do you sustain yourself if you grow by the rate of 1%? I do, because at the end of the day, I am a $14 trillion economy. So I am a $14 trillion economy with a population का base of 350 million. I can easily sustain myself. So 1% is also large. And that 1% is what you are growing at. Your corporations are growing at a percentage more than that. Because our corporations now have a worldwide existence. The rate of return is greater than the rate of growth. And the problem is वो ऐसी condition में ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा पैसा बना रहा है, पर इस पैसे को given the fact कि आप tax नहीं कर रहे हो, इस पैसे का कोई इस्तेमाल नहीं हो रहा है. He is driving up a sectarian politics with that. Leave that. वो किस किस्म का पॉलिटिक्स चला रहा है, वो कितना पागल बन रहा है, वो तो सब छोड़ दो. उसके बारे में सोचना भी जरूरी नहीं है. पर एक सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम जो है, the more richer he becomes, the more worse he creates a condition as far as the lower classes are concerned. आणि ह्याच्यावरती उपाय वरची काम करता क्या? आणि आपल्या घरी जाऊन एक बेटा बिल्ला. Are you getting it? But there's a point to this. The point to this is this, that, which is like obvious ना, कि जर ह्या पुस्तकाच्या इंग्रजी आवृत्त्या या साधारणपणे at last count if I am not wrong, he has managed to end up selling something like 100,000 to 200,000 books of this. So हार्वर्डने याच्यातनं भरपूर पैसा बनवला आहे. ह्या पुस्तकाच्या भरपूर कॉप्या विकल्या गेलेल्या आहेत. त्याचं जो ऑनलाइन व्हर्जन आहे त्याच्यातनं ई बुक्स आणि त्या सगळ्यातनं जे काही गेलं ते तर सोडूनच आहे. तर मुद्दा असा आहे की एवढं सगळं झाल्याच्या नंतर why is it that the American middle class is not doing something about this? Many American middle class should understand this ना कि बाबा शाना माणूस from across France जो तुम्हारे कंट्री में वोटर भी नहीं है, तुमको समझा रहा है कि देखो तुम्हारा प्रॉब्लम क्या है, अच्छा अच्छी खासी इंग्लिश में आपको समझाया है, आपने पढ़ा, आप कन्विंस भी हो गए, आप कर क्यों नहीं रहे हो कुछ? तो उसका एक वजह ये है कि yes, incomes have stagnated, incomes have dipped, but living exactly hasn't become impossible. Even at that low income, you can hang on because excess production moving across the world has successfully dipped the prices of so many goods. कि even with low incomes, ये affordable है, जिया जा सकता है. फ्लरिश कहां तक होगी ये डिपेंड करेगा कि ऊपर की कितनी ट्रिप्स करोगे, पर मरोगे यकीनन नहीं. तो एक जो प्रॉब्लम हुआ है वो ये हुआ है कि टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसेस ऑफ द लास्ट 40 years have ensured a huge amount of production across the world. Excess production in practically every commodity of consumption has successfully managed to drive down prices, creating a second set of problems for multinational corporations. की ज्या प्रॉफिटच्या मार्जिनला तुम्ही ऑपरेट होत होता त्याच्यापेक्षा कमी प्रॉफिटच्या मार्जिनला तुम्ही ऑपरेट होताय, तुम्ही सस्टेन होऊ शकताय. खलल तो है दिल में कि नहीं ये अच्छा नहीं है की 10 वर्षांपूर्वी आपण दरवर्षी 17% वाढत होतो, आता आपण मुश्किल से 60% वाढतोय. तो ये तो बुरी बात है, but you are not exactly making a loss. Are you getting it? So ये बात सही है, but that is not the focus of this book. That is not what he's talking about. The American middle class increasingly has no control over the political process of its country. Has absolutely no control over who gets elected. Who gets elected is finally a function of किसके पास किससे ज्यादा पैसा कितना है. Politics has become apathetic. You are not interested. After 8 years of Obama, we feel good. We got a good president, nice man, family man, अच्छा बात करता था. He actually has a silver tongue. Should I have looked at that speech that he gave in that mosque yesterday? हाँ जोरदार फेस त्याचा तो तर माहित नाही तो काय पण विकू शकतो एवढं खरं. They sell anything. For a speech as beautiful as that, when most of his speeches are like that, gives you some really wonderful speeches. The problem at the end of the day is, ऐकायला बरं वाटतं, पण त्याच्या पलीकडे जाऊन आपल्याला काम करायलाच लागतं ना. He is not going to give me any money. आणि त्याचं भाषण ऐकून काय पैसे मिळणार नाहीये. हां तो सगळा एक कॉम्प्लेक्स प्रॉब्लेम आहे की पॉलिटिक्स मध्ये आपला कुठलाही कंट्रोल नाही. पॉलिटिक्स मधनं मला मिळणार काही नाही. At the end of the day मला जे काही मिळवायचं ते माझ्या लेवलला त्याच्यासाठी प्रयत्न करायचे. त्याच्या अपॉर्च्युनिटीज अँपल आहे. No, not exactly dying. For a simple reason, because the integrated market that the world is ensures that commodities flow from all across the world. हाँ, इसका एक प्रॉब्लम ये है मार्केट ज्यादा एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बनते जाता है, मार्केट और ज्यादा पावरफुल बनते जाता है. Where the market itself is a problem and needs to be regulated, the idea is the market is also the solution for all your problems. कांद्याला भाव नाही मिळाला, एक्सपोर्ट करा. कांदा नाही आहे, इम्पोर्ट करा. पण हा कांद्याचा सीजन नाहीये, तुमच्याकडे नसेल, कुणाकडे तरी असेल ना. Are you getting it? It's coming close to even you. तो हम तक भी इसी तरह से आ रहा है कि आपका इनकम ग्रोथ नहीं होगा, but stagnated income will ensure that you won't die. So जो प्रॉब्लम मार्क्स का था in the 19th century कि the only thing that the worker has to bargain is the capacity to hard physical labor. जो प्रॉब्लम मार्क्स, रिकार्डो, केन्स सबका था. प्राइस ऑफ अ कमोडिटी क्या है? द वैल्यू ऑफ लेबर दैट हैज गॉन इनटू. अब the problem that we are now living with is most production is now capital intensive. pricing has now undergone a change. Markets operate in flashes, in the sense that there would be a certain situation in which there would be a sudden drought of things wherein prices would be jacked up and they make their money. So you are yet in that sort of situation कि जिसमें छीन मत देना है क्या सा तो सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि at the end of the day it's not going to deliver value to you. You are only going to feel कि the amount of work that I am putting in this is not exactly value for my work. But whatever you would get as wages, will see to it that you will survive. Will see to it that you will get access to goods and commodities. आता तो मुद्दा ना तो कि because of this every aspect of life and living becomes commodified. Every aspect of life and living now comes with what is called the price. And is this good enough? Is this bad enough? Well, those are the larger ethical questions with which we have been living for almost the last 150 odd years. ये अच्छा है, ये बुरा है, ये होना चाहिए, ये नहीं होना चाहिए, हो रहा है, ये तो यकीनन है. The problem, as I said, is if you have a politics जिसमें the 1% control the wealth and drive, practically speaking, all aspects of government and politics, the simple problem is आपके वोट का कीमत क्या है? तो बेचारा मरता ना म्हटलं की I am being reduced to a vote. My whole identity is being reduced to a vote. But the sad problem is, as the Americans will tell you, your vote counts for nothing. You are being reduced to a vote is fine, but your vote counts for nothing, absolutely nothing. The media drives the politics with issues which are so inane you don't even understand why they have been talked about. It encourages you to visualize yourself as discrete islands which have no connection with anything beyond you. आपला मुद्दा सुटला ना, आपले इश्यू सुटले ना, की त्याच्यानंतर बाकीचे जगले काय किंवा मेले काय. तुम्ही तुमच्या पुढचा विचार करा. तुम्हाला ग्रॅज्युएशन पाहिजे, आपण त्याचा विचार. त्याला देणं बरोबर आहे का नाही ते नंतर ठरवू. तुम्हाला पाहिजे का ते तुम्ही सांगा. मग अशा केस मध्ये जिथे the voter is progressively being disempowered, but the government is elected, so whose interest is the government representing? वोटर डिसेम्पायर्ड है, गवर्नमेंट तो चुन के आया है, तो गवर्नमेंट किसके इंटरेस्ट को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहा है? You getting it? That is the broader game that we are working with, and that is a larger issue that needs to be addressed. I'll just briefly read something which will make some sense as to what exactly it is that I am saying. Piketty argues that the ratio of capital to income will rise without limit so long as the rate of return is significantly higher than the economy's rate of growth. So capital to income का ratio बढ़ता रहेगा जब तक rate of return is going to be higher than what is called as rate of the growth of the economy. This is normal except when a sizable part of return on wealth is expropriated or destroyed, or when the economy has opportunities for exceptionally fast growth as happened in post-war Europe. And the capital to income rise होत जाणारा जो ratio आहे ना, that is the problematic one. Because this problem is, what is happening is, one-time capitalist with possibly a zero idea is bequeathing this wealth to the next generation. This is what is called as patrimonial capitalism. He capitalism is not being driven. Now, what is a classical case of that? I am very sorry to say it. Hey capitalism is not being driven on account of entrepreneurship, on account of innovation, on account of a brilliant idea. क्या प्रकारचा capitalism is Steve Jobs, क्या प्रकारचा capitalism is Tim Cook, क्या प्रकारचा capitalism is Bill Gates. की ज्याच्यामध्ये I had a brilliant idea. वाईट चुकीची सगळं सोडून द्या. I monetized it, I worked over it, I made my money. बैल अंबानी, that is मुकेश अंबानी, यांनी याच्यातलं काही केलेलं नाही. मग आपल्याला हे मिळालं कसं? पप्पा. पप्पानी कसं मिळालं पण आपल्याला मिळालं कारण पप्पा पॅट्रिमोनियल कॅपिटलिझम. आणि भारतातला क्लासिकल प्रॉब्लेम. And this is the problem that it visualizes for the West. That as the economy starts moving into this situation where the rate of return keeps on increasing beyond the rate of growth, European and American capitalisms are increasingly becoming patrimonial in nature. A lot of American firms, a lot of European firms, especially the top end ones, which are firms which derive their value from what are called as market investments, cannot afford to be patrimonial beyond a level. वे असं नाही की ते प्रयत्न करत नाही, ते प्रयत्न करतात, प्रामाणिक प्रयत्न करतात. प्रॉब्लेम असा आहे एक 2 ते 3 क्वार्टर्स असे गेले की ज्याच्यामध्ये द फर्म हॅज नॉट मेड एनी मनी अँड नॉट पेड एनी डिव्हिडंड्स. पुढच्या क्वार्टरच्या एटीएम ला आहे ना शेअर होल्डर्स खाण्याला बोंब मारतात. What needs to be done is the company's management needs to be changed. म्हणजे ही जी माणसं इथे बसली आहेत ना ज्यांना अंबानी म्हणतात त्यांना तुम्ही स्टॉक ऑप्शन जमले नाही तर बाहेर काढा. कारण त्याच्याशिवाय फर्म can't make money. They are clearly focused on it. We have got to make money. Imagine, I don't know how many of you know Infosys वाला जो crisis था कि when Shivlal stepped down and Narayana Murthy had to come in, and Narayana Murthy equally fast went out bringing in Sika into position. Was a company like Infosys which is extensively marketized cannot convince its shareholders beyond a point that Murthy Papa and Murthy son will make money for the company. चांगले तुम्ही छान माणसं आहात, तुम्ही माणूस म्हणून खूपच चांगले आहात, पण कंपनीने पैसा बनवणे ही वेगळी गोष्ट आहे. तुम्ही तुमचे पैसे घ्या, तुम्ही बाहेर. And I don't know if you have any idea about the sort of monies which they have. मैं नंदन 7,700 crores. उन्होंने खिशात 7,000 रुपये ते बघा 7,700 कोटी कंपनी सोडून दिल्याच्या नंतर. We're talking of that sort of money. पण ह्या फर्म्सची संख्या कमी आहे, ह्या फर्म्सच्या कॅपॅसिटीज लिमिटेड आहेत, ह्या फर्म्स मधली टेक्नॉलॉजिकल डिस्ट्रप्शनचा रेट खूप फास्ट आहे. त्याच्यामुळे ह्या फर्म्स परमनेंटली रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग मोड मध्ये असतात. Either I merge my business with somebody, I acquire somebody else's business and keep on restructuring myself. So these firms represent one end of the market, but that's a very small end of the market. The larger portion of the market, as Piketty says, being now driven by something called as patrimonial capitalism. I don't know if you have any idea about it. There's something called as a capital gains tax. म्हणजे मी कशात तरी गुंतवणूक केलेली आहे आणि ह्या गुंतवणुकीवरती जो परतावा येतो त्याच्यावरती मी टॅक्स भरतो. या मोस्टली गुंतवणुका शेअर डिबेंचर्स मध्ये केल्या जातात. जगभरामध्ये कॅपिटल गेन्स टॅक्स हा अनेक इन्व्हेस्टर्सचा परमनंट प्रॉब्लेम असतो. सो अनेक इन्व्हेस्टर्स साठी सगळ्यात महत्त्वाची गोष्ट अशी असते, सर्च मी अ कंट्री वेअर द कॅपिटल गेन्स टॅक्स इज झिरो किंवा as minimum as is possible. The government of India once upon a time used to levy a capital gains tax, which it even does today. But the one small problem that has been played around in India is, for any investor, you need not pay any capital gains tax in the first year of your investment. But that exactly is the year when he is making his money. And for an economy which is free enough to let capital flow out, the minute you say कि I impose money on your investments, तो जाऊन येतो, तो थोड्या वेळाने परत येतो. Under a new name, a new entity, a new holding, तुम्ही विंडो येतो, तुम्हाला कळत नाही का असं घडतंय म्हणून. घडतंय पण सर काय करणार? आपल्या अर्थकारणाची खूप मोठी गरज आहे. भांडवली गुंतवणूक झाली पाहिजे आणि स्थायी पातळीवरती झाली पाहिजे. त्याच्यामुळे आपल्याला कळत असताना देखील आपल्याला हे एनकरेज करायला लागतं, कारण दॅट्स ओनली वन वे ऑफ ड्रायव्हिंग कॅपिटल विद इन द कंट्री. There's something called as wealth tax, which is out. Taxes on wealth and capital gains अमेरिकेच्या केसमध्ये 40 वर्षांमध्ये 77 ते 2007 प्रोग्रेसिव्हली ऑलमोस्ट झिरोला आणून ठेवलेले. So bequests, inheritances, huge billions of dollars च्या होतात आणि त्याची कुठलेही टॅक्सेस लागत नाही. Piketty has that as a problem. कि ये पैसा आपने टैक्स करना है. इंडिया चाइना जैसी कंट्रीज जो है वो ऐसे वाली हरकतें जो है ना टैक्सेशन की इनको एनकरेज करती है विद द आइडिया कि दिस विल ड्राइव इन समथिंग कॉल्ड एज कैपिटल इनटू द कंट्री. म्हणजे जसं येतं तसंच ते जातं. तुम्हाला तो आकडा जर आठवत असेल जो मी तुम्हाला सांगितलेला होता, $510 billion is what left the country between 2004 to 2014. And in Modi's first full year as Prime Minister of India, the total capital outflow out of India was $51 billion. Third in terms of the total outflows as far as world economies are concerned. At the top was China, number 2 Russia, number 3 India. And in the period between 2001 to 2015, India received $329 billion as capital inflows. तो 329 बिलियन अंदर आया, 510 यहां से बाहर आया. बहुत खूबसूरत चल रहा है. You enjoy the fun. Are you getting it? And it's obvious. It's a simple game. म्हणजे ते जर 510 बाहेर येऊ शकत नसतील ना, तर ते 329 आहेत ना, त्यांना आत येण्याचं कुठलंच कारण नाही. ते आत आलेले चान्स टू ड्राइव्ह 510 आउट. You enjoy it. You simply enjoy the fun. The problem is कि the Chinese can at least do something. पण आपल्याकडे काहीच नाहीये. कारण आपला सगळ्यात मेजर प्रॉब्लेम is the very base of your GDP is very low. 51% आपका पॉपुलेशन अभी भी एग्रीकल्चर से ताल्लुक रखता है. कसं करायचं? The second problem is rate of return is greater than the rate of growth. And Indian capitalism का मेरे लिए सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम ह्यूमैनिटी पैट्रिमोनियल कैपिटलिज्म की इतनी सुंदर आइडिया है, कारण that explains for me the prevalence of caste and contemporary. Capitalism in India is a casteist phenomenon, completely casteist. And patrimonial capitalism तो और भी casteist है. तुम्ही ना हे जे मोठे लोक असतात ना, मला माहित नाही त्याला मोठं म्हणायचं का नाही, म्हणून जा सगळे लोक म्हणतात कमी कमी तो मेल्याच्या नंतर पेपरमध्ये मोठी जाहिरात येते म्हणून तर मोठा होईल. तो असे जे गोयंकास बिर्लास त्यांच्या कुटुंबांमध्ये कोणी मेलं ना, त्यांच्या जाहिराती पेपरमध्ये येतात आणि त्या जाहिरातींमध्ये कुणाला दुःख झालेलं आहे, शोक, की सदरील ग्रस्त किंवा सदरील गृहिणी जे काही व्यक्ती दिसत आहेत ते मेलेले आहेत, याची खाली एक लिस्ट असते. ती लिस्ट तुम्ही नजरे खाली घाला म्हणजे तुम्हाला कळेल की व्हॉट इज दॅट ऍक्सेंट. विशेषतः जिथं आम्हाला मुली असतात तिथं मुलींची नावं ज्या कुटुंबातला पुरुष मेलेला आहे किंवा स्त्री मेलेली आहे त्यांच्या नावाने नाही घालता येत. मुलींची लग्न झालेली असतात, सो ते नाव तिच्या नवऱ्याच्या नावाने घालायला लागतं. म्हणून चेक आउट की नाव कुणाची आहेत. आपका कैपिटलिज्म पूरी तरह से पैट्रिमोनियल है. आपका कैपिटलिज्म पैट्रिमोनियल होने की वजह से पूरी तरह से कास्टिस्ट है और उसका एक दो ऐसी खास किस्म की आइडियाज और चीजें हैं जिसमें बहुत ज्यादा दिलचस्पी है। And it also explains the nature of what is called as your media products and content. तर सगळ्या 8 वाजता जे सिरियल असतात त्याच्यातील लोक मोठ्या घरांमध्ये कशी राहतात म्हणजे आपण कधीच असल्या घरांमध्ये राहत नाही आणि आपल्याला अशी मोठं हॉटेल म्हणून माहिती असतं घर राहण्यासाठी असतं असं म्हणून माहित नसतं आणि त्या कुटुंबांमध्ये लोक पण जास्त असतात। घर मोठं असतं बरोबर आहे पण लोक पण एवढी आहे म्हणजे एक प्रॉब्लेमॅटिक ना। तुम्ही एवढ्या सगळ्या तुम्ही एकत्र राहायचं त्रासदायक आहे। आपण त्या 19व्या शतकात राहत नाहीये ना। उंच माझ्या भोकामध्ये राहण्याच्या घरात 8 लोक होते तर बरं ते 19व्या शतकात राहायचे। आपण 21व्या शतकात राहताना अशा घरांमध्ये का राहतोय आणि तुम्ही राहत नाहीये। पॅट्रिमोनियल कॅपिटलिझम राहते ना। तिच्या व्हॅल्यूज काय आहे तिच्या ॲटिट्यूड्स काय आहे तिला जे सोशल फॉर्म्स आणि टाइप्स प्रिव्हिलेज करायचे वाटतात ते काय असतात। एक्सप्लेन्स अ लॉट। अपनी केस में तो ये किस्सा आजकल का नहीं ये तो पूरा 100 साल का किस्सा है। जितना जरूरत है ना to use inheritance taxes to break up the stranglehold of patrimonial capitalism और western capitalism उससे कुछ ज्यादा ही जरूरत इंडिया की केस में। But it comes with that attendant risk. You increase taxation, you are going to witness capital flight. पण त्याच्यावरती मला परमनंट म्हणणं असेल की ना तुम्ही सिरियसली टॅक्स लावून टाका। But the French will leave. Let me see where the Ambanis go. They are so problematic business practices. My point is कि लगाओ के देखते तो क्या होता है। In the Indian case, the Indian way of doing it is mandatory CSR, which is to some extent driving up some sort of activity in the vicinity where the firm is located. पर उसके अलावा और उसके आगे कुछ भी नहीं। And as compared to the scale of every problem that they are trying to address, the scale of CSR is far too limited. सेवा काय नाही करता है म्हणजे तो जो R रेट ऑफ रिटर्न ग्रेटर दॅन रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ आहे ना याला एकच सोल्युशन आहे की रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ वाढवा नाहीतर रेट ऑफ रिटर्न कमी करा। रेट ऑफ रिटर्न साठी एकच ऑप्शन आहे टॅक्सेशन लावा। टॅक्सेशनचा प्रॉब्लेम आजच्या जगामध्ये जसं मी म्हटलं एकच साधा आहे जेव्हा यू हॅव एनकरेज्ड ओपन एंडेड फायनान्शियल इन्स्टिट्यूशन्स अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड वेअर मनी कॅन व्हेरी इझिली फ्लो इन अँड आउट। यू आर लिव्हिंग इन अ वर्ल्ड वेअर कॅपिटल फ्लोज आर कंप्लीटली अनरिस्ट्रिक्टेड अँड अनइम्पीडेड। याच्यावरती शाण्या सुद्धा माणसांनी एक ऑप्शन सुचवलेला आहे। जसं रेट ऑन कॅपिटल इन्व्हेस्टमेंट फ्री एंड लूज आहे तसं रेट ऑन लेबर जिसके लिए लेबर शुड बी अलाउड टू बी फ्री एंड लूज। तो जैसे कैपिटल कैन जंप प्लेसेस यू शुड इक्वली लेट लेबर बी इक्वली फुटलूज ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड एंड टॉक टू इंडियन कंपनीज टू रियलाइज कितना प्रॉब्लमैटिक है when the Americans go to Congress demanding that Indians should be kept away from America. I hope you know that grand visa conspiracy. They have this big plan drawn up. आता luckily enough Congress अभी छुट्टी में गया है इसलिए तो जब वापस आएगा ना तो देखो क्या मजा आएगा। There are big bold plan drawn up कि Indian software firms जहाँ अमेरिका में भी ऑपरेट होता है which includes names like TCS and Infosys use loopholes in the American immigration system to bring in Indians into America to work on short-term contracts, thereby creating a problem in the American labor market. इतना सांगता ना हमका कि अमेरिकन लोग काम नहीं कर सकते, स्किल नहीं है उसके पास तो, और वो बोल के वो इंडियन बंदे को लेके आता है, उसको शॉर्ट टर्म वीजा पे लेके आता है, उसको इंडियन वेजेस देता है, अमेरिकन वेजेस नहीं देता है, which is also a problem for a number of employees of these firms in America कि what we are being paid are Indian wages but not American wages. और म्हणून आता म्हणणे की स्टॉप कंप्लीटली वो लूपहोल जो है ना पूरी तरह से प्लग कर दो, don't let anyone who is an Indian skilled worker appear on American shores. You let capital, just capital free है ना, you let labor be free. घूमने दो इधर. नहीं तो दूसरा ऑप्शन is increase the rate of growth. So rate of return को कंट्रोल करो या फिर rate of growth को increase करो. और rate of growth को increase करने का fundamental problem is what is called as technological innovations. कि जिसमें minor increase in rate of growth है, but that is enough and substantive to give them their profits, but is not enough to drive up wages. Huge overcapacities है, massive technological disruptions है. Massive, म्हणजे I'm somebody who regularly travels by public transport. मी बस मधून प्रवास करणारा माणूस आहे. आणि परवा I don't know why, but in this bus that was traveling between Shivajinagar and Swagat, while getting down, I suddenly realized कि western buses मध्ये कंडक्टरच नसतो. हा कंडक्टर चांगली माणसं असतात. सगळ्यात महत्त्वाचं म्हणजे पुण्यातल्या बसेस मधले कंडक्टर पुण्यातले नसतात. ते पुण्यामध्ये राहतात. मग चांगली माणसं असतात. पण उद्या तर काय कोणाच्या डोक्यात आलं आणि तसं की वेस्टर्न बसेस मध्ये करतात की जे एंट्री पॉइंट्स आहेत ते एंट्री पॉइंट्स बार्ड असतात. यू नीड टू पुट इन अ टोकन, यू नीड टू पुट इन अ पेनी, यू नीड टू पुट इन सम मनी. डिपेंड ऑन तुम्ही कुठल्या कंट्रीमध्ये सिस्टम कशी ऑपरेट करते. तो तुम्हाला आतच सुरू देत नाही जोपर्यंत तुम्ही पैसे टाकत नाही. तुम्ही पैसे टाका, बार उघडतो, तुम्ही आत जाऊन बसता, बस जाते. सिंपल. कंडक्टरची गरज नाही. And these days they are also sort of innovating something called as driverless cars. So the next round of innovation. Cars which can levitate, cars which possibly don't need drivers. Endless है. इंसान की सोच का दायरा, इंसान की इमेजिनेशन का दायरा completely endless है. पण आपल्याला राम मंदिर बांधायचं हे विषय. काय लक्षात ठेवा, आपल्याला राम मंदिर बांधायचं. हे सगळं आहे ना, दुनिया चंद्रावर आपण उतरावं. लोक ड्रायव्हरलेस कार्स, कंडक्टरलेस बसेस, I don't know what you do.